Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of At Home with Holmes. Thank you, Maddie, for those hand gestures. And for you, the audience, joining us here today, this evening, morning, night, wherever you are. And so, as you know, we are housekeepers. And so we have some housekeeping before we get into this episode.
If you want to know, because you all do and have been asking, the secret to our intellect and our handsome good looks, there are 3 things you have to do. 1, touch nature. 2, consume good product. 3, wear good product. And how you can do this, and in this order, you start by going to Cabin on the Coulee, cotc.ca.
Where you can touch some grass.
Touch some grass, get into some nature. This is time to rejuvenate your soul. Our family does this once a year. It is rated #1 farm stay in Canada, according to TripAdvisor. And so go to cotc.ca, and this is where you can go to these central Alberta glam sites with your family.
Yeah, it is between May to November, and people are already booking vacations, so guys, make sure to book in advance. And if you go on that website, you'll see that you have the selection between the cabin, which holds 6 guests, 3 bedrooms, and 4 beds. You also have the Coulee Yurt, which holds 5 guests, 3 bedrooms, 3 beds. And then last but not least, the Grouse House, which holds 4 guests, 1 bedroom, and 2 beds. All of the photos are online, and the cabin and the Grouse House are pet friendly. The Coulee Yurt is not. But again, go to cotc.ca to check those guys out, and then you can go to their Substack, Cabin on the Coulee Farm, to get updates on the family and the business and any updates. And if you scroll down, you'll see, oh, these 2 lovely people, or 3 lovely people. You'll see the owner of the business, Eric, interviewing me and Maddie when we were at Cornerstone. And if you hadn't noticed those beautiful garments that we are wearing,
you can buy a beautiful garment on our Buy Me a Coffee. This is step 2. You can buy us a matcha on the homepage, because that's how you be healthy. This is the second thing you need to do to get our intellect. And if on the far right, you can see shop. That's how you get the 3rd and final step, which is beautiful garments, the Alberta jerseys.
And what is it that Jordan Peterson says? He says you got to dress up like you actually care about yourself. Mm-hmm. And not only do we dress like we care about ourselves, but you and us, we all can dress like we care about our nation, which we do. I am not joking about that. I'm just having fun.
And you can buy more than one if you want to spread the love to family members. Makes good gifts. When you buy it, it'll do a little pop-up message for you to send me your size, so I know what to send you.
Yep. So again, if you want to achieve our lovely intellect and handsomeness, then check out Cabin on the Coulee Farm, buy me a coffee, aka matcha, and support us by shopping for a jersey and support Alberta that way. So thank you guys for listening to our little segment, and without further ado, we can get on with the episode.
Recording in progress. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of At Home with Holmes. This is part 5.
Yes.
Of our current series on changing axioms. Whose battlefield are we on? And for the first time, we are very giddy about it. We have CyptoRich from the UK on. He was perfect for this series because if anybody hasn't met the individual, and I'm sure he'll give a bit of background, but he has gone kind of similarly to Tom Luongo, who identified a little bit as, more libertarian. Crypto came from a very liberal background, and so he has had this big interviewing people like Colonel Towner, Walking Floors, Matthew Aird, Tom Luongo, Alex Craner. He has had his mind blown, and we've gotten to kind of watch him go through this journey through learning about finances. And even the interview, he did one with Colonel Towner Watkins, and she was talking about, it was the trafficking and the Catholic Church, how it contributed to that in Cuba. And he's just like, I'm not ready for this, Towner. I'm not ready for this. So real time, if you know anything or have watched his videos, which you definitely should, he real time has to change his axioms in the middle of his shows, but he's got the right flexibility of mind to do so. And that's what we're trying to do this series for, is to teach everybody how to emulate that. And so, Dad, broader context for our Albertan crowd here?
Right. So most of the episodes, I also kind of like name our action. Why are we doing this episode, and why is this series important? And for viewers of the channel that understand our family, they know that we're politically active. They know that we're involved in all sorts of movements when it comes to 3-letter groups and acronyms that are working for the independence of Alberta. And one of the things that we find challenging in and amongst our friends and families on the front lines of freedom fighting is the difficulty in what it means to change your axiom. When you look at the world and you believe that you have this stasis static idea of how things are functioning, it can be a very fearful and difficult place, because there's a line that Mark Twain had said that's like, oh, it's easier to fool someone than to convince them that they've been fooled. And a lot of the times when you're in that place, you're trepidatious. Sometimes you double down, you get left hemisphere locked, as our family likes to discuss it with our brain work. The series is to help give examples of the wide range of minds that found themselves, in different circumstances where they needed to change their points of view in order to find a better way through to navigate the map that they're trying to go through. So we're hoping that Rich will share a little bit of that background of his own story, how those changes came about. He's a great friend of the Sean Newman podcast as well, and that's another Alberta-centric podcaster. We do have a theme that we believe podcasters should unite. If crypto's family goes dark, we want people asking the questions. Patrick Henry, in his address to the 1775 Congress, had stated that their act was righteous and that help was on its way. And you couldn't get what the Americas were going for with the political system of economy that they have without having friends from other countries and relationships that got built. We don't have Benjamin Franklin running around building all those relationships. We're going to have to do it by committee, and this is one of the processes. So, Rich, thank you very much for coming on. You are held in high esteem in this household with the quantity of listening that we do to your programs. And we, too, are the plebs that we're trying to figure out our way through it. Tell us your journey.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. And whenever I get an invite, my internal reaction is, why do they want to talk to me? Nobody comes to my channel to listen to me. They come to listen to Tom Luongo or Alex Craner or, whoever, but Ian Burlingham, not me, which would be a surprise to my friends and family, because they would all say, no, he has a lot to say. He has a lot to say. A little bit about myself. I live in the UK. I was born in Pakistan. I'm Muslim. My wife is Christian. My brother is a Muslim author. His wife is Jewish. We are a family of the book. My son, a couple of years ago, decided to become a devout Sufi Muslim. My father's Shia, and my mum was Sunni. And I wouldn't ordinarily say this, like I wouldn't have said this a few years ago, but times are very different now. And politically, I have traveled from being very old school, traditional British left wing to now being a far right white supremacist. I believe in terrible things like family. I'm opposed to open borders, despite being an immigrant myself. But then my father was invited. He had a job and an interview, right? And came with my mum and my brother and my sister and me. And I believe in things like sovereignty and home education. And I don't think the state should be killing people if they're not well. Just old-fashioned notions like that. So that's just a little bit about me. I started my channel in April 2017 because I came across Bitcoin a few years earlier, and I watched it and I was like, oh, this is something. And I thought, well, how can I get into this? I'm not a coder or a programmer or an IT guy. I'm actually a qualified and experienced child protection social worker. And I started running my channel, and in November last year, my son came in with me and he said, look, we got to start a politics channel. You really enjoy that. Forget the crypto. And, credit to him, the Rich Does Politics has just exploded, 40,000 plus subscribers. But credit to him, but also credit to people like Tom Luongo. I've been interviewing Tom Luongo for over 9 years.
Wow.
And people like Ian Burlingham and Alex Craner and Susan Kokinder and many, many others. And then the other thing I got to say about my channel is I'm not interested in my channel being an echo chamber. So I have people on my channel who, some of them think the war in Iran is a good idea because it's attacking the city of London. Others are like, no, it's not. This is war. Innocent people are being killed. I'm not interested in echo chamber. I'm interested in civil discourse and discussion. It used to be quite commonplace before lockdown. So that's just a little bit about me.
The lockdown, was that a big change for you and your family? Like when you guys first walked into the COVID debacle?
Yes and no. I hope that answers your question.
That was kind of the same for us, like the yes and no. because funny enough,
Yeah.
Maddie and I were like online
Yeah.
schooled during that time. So they were like, oh, that must have been so hard for you. And it's like, not really. We weren't going anywhere either way, but more the ostracization of like, if you didn't get a death jab, then you can't go anywhere. And that's kind of like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. No. I mean, just a little bit about them. My parents were both homeopaths. My 20-year-old and 18-year-old never went to school. I'm a council official who never sent their kids to school. I'm a Punjabi that doesn't eat naan because I'm high fat, low carb. I'm a Muslim that went to Quaker meetings for 10 years. So I not really go along with what everybody else does. It
Yeah.
wasn't too much of a radical departure from, as I'm already radically departing from everything. In terms of, I suppose, my political journey and political awareness, I went to a school in North London where 55% of the kids were African Caribbean. And then the next largest rump were Indians. And then there were Roman Catholic Irish. And then then the rest were local English. And then a handful of Pakistanis. And I remember, I think it was 1982, W. Boter came to the UK on a state visit invited by Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. And I hadn't really known anything about apartheid. And then I saw the news reports and learned about what was happening in South Africa. And I was appalled. Like, how can they do that to people? And I was like, how come we didn't get taught that at school? 55% of the kids here are African Caribbean, all these Indians, and we're not taught about apartheid. So I got involved in the anti-apartheid movement, which was my first political activity. And then from there into various left-wing protests like the anti-tax demonstrations and anti-war, lots and lots of anti-war, because I'm up for a world where human beings honor human beings. And then with the lockdown, I fell for it for the first 6 weeks.
Right.
I was scared. I didn't know what was going on. I had no reference points. And then at some point, I was, why am I just listening to what the government are saying without questioning it? Why am I just listening to what Big Pharma is saying? So then I started digging into it. And there was no way I was going to have that very safe and effective novel medical intervention. No way, no way. I'd rather die, is what I said to myself. If I had that, well, I'm going to die anyway. Yeah, so I was like, I got to stay alive for the sake of my children. And I was scared. I worked for a local authority where you have to wear masks to go inside. And I was like, what if they say you can't come into the council building unless you've had an injection? I'll find some other way to provide for my family. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And then at the time, my wife, my son, my daughter, and my sister who lives with us, none of us had the injections. Meanwhile, every single person in my family, and I have a pretty large family, they've had at least one, and
Okay.
I said what I said when I said it and try and encourage them not to, but hey ho, there you go. They didn't listen to me about Bitcoin in 2013, and they didn't listen to me about the injections in 2021.
Okay, that's interesting. So, because you started, people shouldn't overlook the opening that you began with the fact that your family background, both your internal and your external family, had all these various religions. I'm curious for you to expand a bit more about that, because that alone says something about the openness of your family's disposition. Because religious, especially with some of the gladio-like operations that we know about, there have been many, many attempts, even via the Crusades and then with the Protestant Union and the Reformation. I mean, there have been many pushes to get people to marry their religion and ideology. And clearly that didn't work on your family, or maybe it did. You can expand upon that. So that's one thing that's very stark. And then another, clearly there's something about you and your journey that's different from the family, like, which contrasts from my family, because none of us got it. Dad he had read the book. My mom kind of, ordered him, Mike, read this book on the truth about COVID-19 and do it now. And he's like, yes, ma'am. And then read it within 24 hours. And then he suggested to my brother and my beau, read this before you decide. But he didn't tell them what to do. He just said, read it before you decide. And because me and Macy were listening to all the podcasts with Dad at the time and doing the research, he didn't have to convince us of anything. We had already kind of made up our minds. But just that little informed consent nudge was enough to get everybody in our household kind of on the same page. And that wasn't the case for your family. So clearly it's not an easy thing to teach, that open-mindedness and that flexibility of mind. I mean, even our family learning about the right hemisphere, when people hear about the brain and it takes a special person not to glaze over because it's new knowledge. This is not stuff, it's not in the forefront. And if it is, it's the co-opted version of it. And so I'm curious about that aspect.
I can expand on that. Thank you. And it's something that occasionally I talk about. Occasionally. You talk about left brain, right brain, and there was the book, because I listened to your interview with Tom Luongo. I
Dr.
forget
Ian
the name of the author
McGilchrist,
and I forget
the
the name of the
master and
book.
his emissary.
Yeah, Ian
Yeah.
McGilchrist, right? Yeah. Yeah, I've never read the book, but I am trained in another model. It's based upon ontology and more specifically phenomenology, which is the philosophy of experience. How do I communicate with you in such a way and be with you in such a way that you and I have a particular experience of that interaction that's spacious and gracious and gives you room to be? How do I alter my lived experience of life to go from what it was to something else that's far more rewarding and fulfilling? So that's phenomenology. And then the way it kind of works is like who I'm being gives rise to the actions that I take. And the actions that I take gives rise to the results that I have. And I've done a lot of work in terms of personal development, communication skills, and stuff like that. So if you said to me, if I was a shy person and you said to me, hey, Rich, go and stand up in front of 200 people and talk, tell them about Bitcoin, because you know a lot about Bitcoin. Well, I could do it one to one, but if who I'm being is shy, then I'm not going to be able to do that. And you saying to me, oh, but you know so much about it. You're great with me one to one, but the being doesn't shift. I'm a little bit wary about saying what I'm about to say. I just need to say that, but I'm going to say it anyway because I'm not shy, despite any protestations to the contrary. So in the UK, so my brother's a dean, which is higher than a professor, apparently. My grandfather was a professor. Everybody in my family's got degrees up the yin yang. My mum lectured. She taught English in university in Pakistan. My father came here as a diplomat, working for the Pakistan embassy. So I come from an incredibly educated family. Everybody has degrees. I got doctors and lawyers and judges and army officers in my family. And then I go to school. I failed my A-level exams 3 times in a row. It's not looking good. I'm going to be the only one in my family, my entire family, without a degree. My parents are going to be disappointed in me. What am I going to do with my life? They never wanted me to do social work anyway. Like, what Pakistani guy does bloody social work, for crying out? Certainly not in the UK. I went to university as a mature student because I could only get so far without a qualification. I just had to give an interview and write an essay on a book I was reading. And then in the third class of my third year, my 4-year course, I had a row with the lecturer. I stood up in my arrogance and my belligerence, educating this white guy about race and racism because he was talking about how Cornish people get it too. And I'm in the lecture room telling him about slavery and imperialism, all that. Remember, I'm so off the edge as a lefty. And I decided the department sucks. I'm not going to any more classes anymore. Just not going to. I got involved in student politics, got really stressed by that, and decided to take the next year out. And then I come back in October. I got my final exams in January. Oh, it's not looking good. I failed exams all my life. My family are going to be really disappointed. Never wanted me to do social work anyway. What the hell am I going to do? And my mum, who was a teacher, she said to me, and she told my sister did this weekend course, and my mum did this weekend course, and they said to me, do the Lamont Forum. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. It's a 3-day and an evening course. Okay, well, I trust my mum, I trust my sister. I did it in November. And the way that it's designed is to allow people to generate insights about their own life. So, if I spent time with one of you over a coffee talking about your life and everything, I'd see things about you, you'd see things about me. You could tell me some things you see about me, but would I listen? Would they register? Would they be accurate and useful? Who knows? But when I see something about myself, oh my God, I can't unsee it. I have a choice about whether I act upon it or not. And what by being able to generate these personal epiphanies, I get to know myself and how I operate. How did I get to be the way that I am? Why do I do the things that I do? And what else is possible? So I had all these insights. Do the Landmark Forum in November. I got my final exams in January. I got to do 4 exams in a row, one day after another. By the way, my coursework was excellent. I was just shit at exams. My first exam, and I used what I got out of the course to cause breakthroughs in communication, in confidence, in self-expression, productivity. My first exam, I was so relaxed. I spent the first 10 minutes writing a letter to God, thanking him for my life. Put the letter away, sat the exam, came the following day, and the following day, sat 4 exams. And then in March, I go to the department, get the envelope with the results, open it up, go back to halls, ring up my mum on the telephone, not mobile. John, I got a first class honors degree. Now, if you'd have said to me, Rich, I know you failed exams all your life. I know you pissed off half the faculty with your arrogance and your belligerence. And I know you've only got 2 months. Do this course. I promise you, you'll get a first class honors degree. What the fuck are you talking about? Sorry, I'm channeling Tom Luongo here.
Yeah.
What the hell are you
Yeah.
talking about? It's just not possible. And how it kind of works, I didn't have the insight until June later that year, which is I remember when I was in primary school. I was really good in French, one of the best in my class, and they decided to split the class up into groups. So we all had to have one-to-one tests. And I remember this teacher taking me into me what looked like a staff room. I'd never been in a room like this before. She put pen and paper in front of me, and she said to me, "Écrire une maison," draw a house. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't do anything. This was really confusing and puzzling. Why am I here? Why do I got to do this? Why does she want me to do this? So when I next go to the French class and they say, you're not in that class, you're in the lower set. And I'm like, wait a minute, but I'm really good at French. Yeah, but you failed your exam. And in that moment, with the wit and wisdom of a 9-year-old, I decided that I was no good at exams. And that decision, well, that's me. Well, what do you like, Rich? Well, I'm like this, I'm like that. Oh, by the way, I'm no good at exams. And I'd forgotten that I'd made that decision. If you go through life and some of those decisions, like the moment I asked my wife to marry, my then girlfriend to marry me, or the moment I took this job, or the moment I accepted your invitation, okay, life goes a particular way. But there's some decisions that I've made about myself, about other people, about how life is, that I've forgotten that I've made, and I'm still living out of them. And then when you talk about changing axioms, there's something happened, and I created an interpretation. And the interpretation that I created got collapsed. Like the interpretation is the reality. Like in distance, time, and form, in reality, it's solid. I'm no good at exams. And then what I've developed, because I eventually went to work for Landmark, I led some of their programs. I now do voluntary work for them because it makes such a difference in people's lives. The interpretation got separated, and then, well, I can create other interpretations that empower my commitment. I got another one for you, which I really, really didn't expect. So, I told you about the diversity of my family. Well, what I didn't tell you before I got married, my long-term relationship was with a Hindu. Now, the reason for all of that, I grew up in London. I grew up in London, right? It's just people are people, right? And then, with my anti-apartheid politics, I don't care. I love all the peoples. So, so I had this relationship with this girlfriend, this Hindu, and my family didn't know. It was a secret. Her family didn't know. There was no way. Now, my mum was a liberal Sunni, and there's no way I could tell my father is Orthodox Shia. I couldn't tell either of them. They were both refugees from partition from India, fled their homes in India to make a new life in Pakistan. And when I did the Landmark Forum, I didn't have this in mind, but I suddenly saw that I could tell my parents about my relationship with this girl and have my relationship with my parents improve. And I didn't think that was possible. So, if you guys look out into your life, okay, there's certain things that you think are possible. Well, what's possible that's completely outside your thinking?
An independent Alberta.
And can't even conceive of it. That's not outside your thinking.
That's true.
That's inside your
That's inside our
thinking.
thinking.
Oh, I
Yeah.
know the oligarchy is not gonna.
Yeah.
They're not gonna allow it. So we're gonna
That-
have to think our way
It's
through
outside
it.
the oligarchy's
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah,
Sure,
exactly.
but that's still inside your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That's all inside your thinking, right? So anyway, the week after I did the Landmark Forum, I went to see my father. My parents were separated. I went to see my father, and I said to him, I want you to know something about me. My best friend knows this about me. You don't, but you're the one that gave me life. So I'm going to tell you something about me. I've got a girlfriend. We have a sexual relationship. We have no plans on getting married. And she's a Hindu. And my dad very calmly said to me, he said, Bete, I'm glad you told me. You two, she should become a Muslim and you two should get married. Or better still, you two should stop seeing each other because you got to think of her family. And I said, Abi, we're not going to do that. He said, okay, I've told you. And then what happened is my father would invite me and my then girlfriend round for meals. He'd cook her vegetarian dishes. He was always, always loving. And he was always, always straight with us. Become a Muslim, get married, or stop seeing each other. Oh, here's some balik paneer.
I love that.
Now, if you'd have told me, that's just no way could that have happened. My father was shot at by Hindus and Sikhs. They're idol worshippers. The British played us against each other. That's the thing about axioms. And then it shows up for me in my social work because, I get a phone call from the police or the school or something. We think there's something going on with this kid. We think they're being mistreated or abused. We'd like you to go in. Okay, well, yeah, that's my job. I'll go in. So I go to the house and I don't know what I'm going to encounter. And then I got to examine the dynamics of what's happening in that household from what the father says, from the mother's interpretation, from the eldest child's interpretation, from the youngest child's interpretation, from what the GP says, the police say, from what the school says, school nurse, health visitor, all these different interpretations. And I'm looking for coherence and I'm triangulating and looking to see what fits. And then I got to be willing to dispense any notions that I have that I think, well, I know what's going on. So there have been instances where, there's one case in particular where I was going to replace a previous social worker who couldn't work with this family anymore because it was just too difficult. And I came in, and it was that half the professionals thought that the mum was a victim of domestic abuse by the father. And she had all this evidence and she was, she'd convinced women's aid organizations and some of the police and this and that, right? And I go in and I start digging, examining, looking at it from different angles, drawing everything together. She wasn't happy with me because I said, no, you're the one exerting coercive control. And was able to provide enough evidence to show the other professionals that that was the case. But ordinarily be like, okay, well, usually it's the dad, but wait a minute, when men do it, it's very, very physical, overt, brutal, apparent, usually it has those elements. When women do it, it's insidious, devious, manipulative, coercive, quietly undermining. One is the United States and the other is Britain.
Amen.
Played out as a fractal.
Oh my God.
Nice. I saw that coming, actually.
That is like a lot to unpack. You just gave us like 3 different stories.
Right?
How I'm seeing that though is it's interesting when you were talking about, and they actually like all really connect quite nicely, is when we're talking about the changing axioms and you started talking about how you had an interpretation of yourself and it wasn't lining up with what was outside your thinking, as you were talking about, of, oh, well, there is a possibility that you could be good at exams, right? And so after you took that form, and it's interesting because being in the younger generation with all of this wokeism and the, I guess, leftist ideology now,
Identity politics.
it's interesting because with you and your, I guess, sort of left ideations, so to speak, when you were younger, it's interesting how even the evolution or de-evolution of how leftist ideology has kind of, I guess, evolved. Because even when you were talking about how maybe you were younger and you were like, oh, apartheid, that's not like, we shouldn't be oppressing people, or even with imperialism, it's like we shouldn't be stealing from other people. It's very funny because a lot of those sort of underlying messages are still resonant even within the right community there, because it's like, well, we don't necessarily want other, you know, peoples to be oppressed. It's just more so of how do we figure out the best way of approaching that, and like that's realistic. And how do you preserve a culture, right? Because sure, you don't want to oppress the people, but it doesn't mean that overall there isn't something like a culture, like, and hence you mentioned, you were like, I transitioned into, well, I was an immigrant myself, but I'm against, you know, illegal immigration, for example, right? And even just the imperialism, like our family and all of us, like you mentioned the British Empire, it's like we look at that and we're like, oh yeah, like that's really messed up with what they're doing with their, I guess, MI6 intelligence operations, using countries as proxies for their sort of neo-colonialism. And so it's very funny that a lot, like, I think sometimes people fail to see that it's like we're actually trying to solve a very similar problem, and it's just sometimes we get caught on what the cause is, and we get stuck on where we think the issue lies, but we're still trying to solve an overall issue, which is we don't want human beings to be oppressed in slavery type ways and fashions. And so it's very interesting that there's like that plays, I think, into the sort of axiom shifting. But the thing that I was thinking for my generation when it comes to this, like this wokeism and how it got kind of dialed up to 1,000, is there's two ways that you could look at this. There's the look of kind of like what you were mentioning, which is I'm no good at exams, right? There's a bit of them doing like that whole I'm actually a woman trapped inside a man's body, or I'm a man trapped inside a woman's body. And so it's funny because they put that as their sort of interpretation of reality because of the fad that's going on.
Or I'm ADHD.
Or I'm ADHD, or I have exactly. There's just so many different things that they put. I'm depressed. So I have to take my antidepressants and all that. It's like they are trying to find their identity, sure, but then they attribute and latch on to what it is that they think. And then, like, as you said, you're moving through life still with the gaze that you have adopted, that you didn't even realize that you're still adopting, and then you attached your entire identity onto the interpretation and not anything that's outside of it. Because then if you were like maybe wanting to change their axioms, you could be like, well, have you ever thought about what it would look like if you weren't like trapped inside that body, and if you could get out, like what would that look like, right? And then how do you operate as if that could be a potentiality? And as you said, it's definitely harder when someone is trying to like tell you versus discover yourself. But that's why it's so weird to me, because I said there was two ways to interpret it, because you were mentioning like a form of like how you I guess find yourself and like find more understanding of yourself. And because like they'll take like little BuzzFeed quizzes, you'll take quizzes on like, oh, what am I zodiacs and stuff like that, or like personality traits and all of that fun stuff. But it feels like they're not, even if they acquire it, sometimes I feel like that is also another version of them trying to box themselves in, because now it's like I fit a sort of mold that was given to me by a computer or some test that some person made up. And it's like, that's where I feel like there's the two ways of interpreting it, because someone could say, you saying that I was not a quiz taker, an exam taker or whatever, they could say like, well, I'm not the type of person that can do X, Y, and Z, even though they don't know that for sure. They don't know that for certain.
Well, keyword, you just said type. Crypto already alluded to it when he was first describing the course that he took. He said his actions, like the demonstration, comes from what he does. The question that kids today are asking themselves is, what am I, when they should be asking, like, what do I do? Because the demonstration is the real life negotiating living thing. Your identity is supposed to be negotiated, but that plays downstream, like Crypto said, of your actions. Crypto described it really nice, which is why he said, I didn't have the model of the hemispheres, but this is a similar model, and it really is, because it's the version of stasis versus non-stasis. And the left hemisphere, when you put types or categories, labels onto yourself, onto other people, that is the stasis thing. That is this abstract category that you attribute to yourself. And that is the left hemisphere's interpretation of the world. And that's how it regards people, as the label, versus the right hemisphere sees people as the negotiation and the fluid movement. People have to decide to be a good person or a bad person every day. It's not just this thing that comes out of nowhere and hits you. You have to manifest it. And that's what Dad used to say when we were kids. He would quote Robert Downey Jr. in acting. He'd say, "What is your action?" And so when I was trying to, and Crypto has literally described this journey, I was hypothesizing on the Nat and the Guy podcast that, stuff that we did as kids with the clan in order to start gaining this critical internal thinking process was, we looked at our demonstration. Even you, Macy, with your OCD journey. I mean, you had put yourself, oh, I'm just OCD. And you had yourself in a box for the longest time. But then the thing I kept repeating to you in our multiple conversations was just, but look what you're doing. But look what you're doing. And it's like, it was contrary to the identity that you had given yourself.
If I can come in with a different question. And just so you know,
I forgot he does childcare, so I'm like, oh, here we go. No, I'm sorry.
I think a far more useful question is, what's hidden from my view? What is it about myself that I cannot see, and I can't even see that I can't see it? Because that has me looking. Like, one of the things I discovered about myself is I'm arrogant. I have this propensity for arrogance. It takes no effort whatsoever. Now, before I did the Landmark Forum, you couldn't have told me that. Who the hell are you? Tell me I'm arrogant. Go clean up your own backyard. Right? But when I see it for myself, oh, I can lie to myself about it. But I still know. I've seen it. Nobody's shown it. I'm not going to defend myself against me. I now have a choice that I can carry on, or I can look and see, does me being arrogant, does it further my commitment in my relationships with my friends or at work or with my partner? Well, actually, no, it doesn't. Okay, well, what am I going to do about it? Well, I'm going to tell the truth. I came out and I'm up for him, and I told some of my friends, I started telling them, listen, I've realized I'm arrogant. Thank bloody goodness, they said. Thank bloody goodness. And then there's nothing for them to defend against or argue with me about. I own up to it. I have been that way. I'm really sorry. And if you catch me, if it seems to you I'm being arrogant again, let me know. And I promise, at the very least, I'll shut up. And they started doing that. And then I got good at catching that mechanism. So there was the being arrogant, giving rise to certain actions, giving rise to a certain quality of relationships. And then in terms of, Madison, what you were saying about, gender identity and everything, here's what I think is a fundamental design of human beings. And unless and until there's some other model, right? This one works pretty well, but I'm open to other models, other interpretations. This one I found very, very practical. You and I, we go through life that there's something wrong. There's something wrong with me. And then what I have to do is and I can tell you all sorts of things that are wrong with me. Something wrong with me. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with life. There's something wrong with my parents, my sister, my brother, my wife, my children. Something wrong. Well, maybe not my children. But yeah, there's still something wrong with them. My son's far too messy. I shouldn't have this color skin. I had to deal with that. My teeth are like this. My eyebrows are like this. My voice sounds like this. It'll be some other way. I should be taller. I think I'm fat. I'm not fat, but I think I'm fat because of the decision I made when I was 8. I move my hands like this. I haven't said the right thing. I shouldn't even be saying this. It's all wrong. And if there isn't something wrong, very soon there will be. So relax. Something's going to go wrong, right?
Amen.
And then what I do is I spend my entire life surviving and fixing this already always automatic interpretation that there's something wrong. And then one of the ways that shows up is human beings end up, do you know what? I don't want to say this. Dad, I don't know your name. Macy and Madison, but I don't know your name.
Mike.
Dad.
Mike, I so apologize. And I was going to go through this entire thing, right? Pretending, not using your name because I was too embarrassed to ask. Just that example of like, there's something wrong. I don't know his name. Oh my God. So Mike,
I'm
when
sure
you
that we
held
wouldn't
your
look at you
daughter-
and say your name is CryptoRich. We're
No,
just
it's-
going. We were just
it's-
going with the stage
yeah.
name.
Yeah, it's rich. It's rich. And the reason for that is I don't want the families that I work with to know that their social worker is CryptoRich.
Yeah.
Because of my far right white supremacist policies. It doesn't go so well in the social work discourse, right? But Mike, when you held your daughters, and if you have sons, any of your kids, and they're firstborn, they're perfect. They're gorgeous. They're wonderful.
I was more along the lines of, okay,
And
so
then
we
what-
have a huge adventure that's about to start, and my job is a guide. I was terrified to be a father, to be completely honest. It was something that I would have happily have run
Okay,
away
but-
from, but but yes, there was definitely
Sure, but
that
the moment you held them,
that the
moment
change.
you held them,
Yes.
oh, they're beautiful. They're perfect. Oh my God. And then do you know what these monkeys do? They grow up and make decisions about themselves that they think are true. And how do I know they did that? Because I did that. You did that. It's what human beings do. We make decisions about ourselves that we think that aren't true, that we think are true. So there's us, and then there's this pretense. And then because it's good for human beings to pretend, because that's inauthentic, we then pretend that we're not pretending. So we just inauthenticity on top of inauthenticity. So I be arrogant because I think there's something wrong with me. I'm deficient in some way. People who are, at ease with themselves, they don't put on arrogance. They don't need to. They're at ease with themselves. I put on being arrogant because I think there's something wrong with me. And then I mask the arrogance by denying it or, creating other ways of operating. You're 16 years old, you're 9 years old, you're 21 years old, and you think you were born in the wrong body? You're perfect. You're just having some thoughts, and you think those thoughts are real. There's nothing wrong with you. We've all had unreal thoughts, right? We could have them now. Easily. We could all have the thought that each of us has got blue skin. Easy to do. Or don't think about the elephant in the room. And then you're thinking about the elephant in the room that isn't there. But what happens with these thoughts, our brain patterns get set. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. I know if I change my exterior, if I change what I have, then I'd be happy. So if I change what I have, doing some chemical or surgical intervention, then it would alter who I'm being. It doesn't work that way. Being doesn't get altered. So then people go and transition and they're miserable. It didn't work because what they didn't deal with is the source. There's nothing wrong with you. You just have silly thoughts and you think your silly thoughts are real. That's all.
That's interesting because it was a funny meme, but it rang really true, which was they say like the ones that are transitioning and such that it's not about down below kind of thing, and they say it's about what's in your brain and all that fun jazz. But then why are you transitioning then? Like why externally are you doing all the surgeries to change what's below or change what's up here or change what's coming out here, right? I'm like, if it's not about any of that, why are you your actions are showing that's exactly what you think it's about, because that's what most people think when they think about some aspect of that human experience, which is when you're thinking of a female, well, what does that physically look like? What does that physically entail? When you're thinking about men, what does that physically look like? What does that physically entail? And then you can get into the character of demonstration, the being you're talking about, which is how do you negotiate that as being one? And then that's a huge, your whole life is in that negotiation to figure out what do you want to do with that. But they are failing to see that it's like, well, you are placing a large percentage of your value into what that externally is, even though you criticize others for doing it, because you are physically wanting to change yourself. Physically. And so it's like they just like it's not seeing that.
But that's human culture. All of human culture. There's something wrong with me, something wrong with them. So I got to change me. I got to change them. So we're just lost in it. So again, it's like, well, what's hidden from my view?
There's a
What is it about
fantastic
myself
quote
that I
from
cannot see?
the Cratylus dialogue in Plato's commentaries of Socrates' life. And in the Cratylus dialogue, Socrates says, there is no greater deception than self-deception when the deceiver is always home.
Yeah. The thing that I find about the work that I've done is how bloody practical it's been and how it's brought about, like, no kidding, material changes. Because I read a lot of self-development books. And while I'm reading the book, I feel good. But then what I'm doing is I'm reading, and what I have is a book. So I came to this country when I was 5, lived in London. Every week, no, every month, every 2 months, I get racial abuse. It's how life is. I joined the anti-apartheid movement, still happened. I went to Bradford University, very large Pakistani population. I studied race and racism, knew all the theories, still got racial abuse. Just how life is. So I did the Landmark Forum in November 1993. I stopped getting racial abuse. You've no idea the difference it made to the quality of my life. I'd be on station platforms in East London, 11 o'clock at night, on the tube, and I think a gang of skinheads are going to come around the corner. Never happened. But I think that. And then I go and do the Landmark Forum, and afterwards I'm like, oh my God, I'm just at peace. And now I think what I'm saying is provoking thinking over there with you. Like, you may be wondering about yourselves, right? How might this apply to you? Which I think is a really great inquiry. Like, how did I get to be the way that I am? Why do I do the things that I do? What else is possible? And what's hidden from my view?
Are those questions
I
that
share with you.
they asked you, or did they have you do writing exercises? Did they have you do discussion groups?
Not this. Well, in the foundation course, it's not. It's just one person and then 150, 200 people online or in a room. I did it in a room, just as a dialogue, and then sometimes people in the program leader have an interaction. We listen in. It's absolutely phenomenal. You know, I'm up for one of the things I created out of my participation with Landmark is I created a personal mission statement. I'm up for a world where human beings honor human beings. All human beings honor all human beings. So it shapes. It's the background context. We all live from background context. Like Macy and Madison, you live from the context. No, I may be on thin ice here, right? You might surprise me of being women. Might you live from the context of being a man, as do I. Now, I'm open to something else, right? You might have some other
Surprise,
context. To
Dad! I have something to tell you.
but I doubt it, right?
Go tell your mother.
Right? But we don't think about that. We just operate from that. It's just natural. Or, you know, someone who's of a particular faith, they just operate from that background context. So then the one I've created for myself is I'm up for a world where human beings honor human beings. And I hope, fingers crossed, it shapes the conversations I have with people with on my channel. It certainly shapes what I do as a social worker. And then also it shapes my campaigning for notaxforwar.com, which is a process where people in the UK can lawfully, legally, peacefully withhold their taxes as a protest against two things: against war and any other damn policy this bastard authoritarian government are imposing. Take your pick.
That's a good transition to actually like so when as we're going through this journey of the changing axioms and then like trying to figure out what it is that we might be missing. Like, oh, what is it that I'm not paying attention to and such like that. I think that what's interesting is when you go from like the micro to the macro of how human beings interact with themselves, with each other, it really can. You can see it kind of like mirror what's going on also on a larger scale, like even between like nations, for example, or just like how a country might operate within itself. And so what I'm curious about is, so you said that you're from the UK, and we know that we've been paying, like our family has been paying attention, obviously, to what's been going on in Canada, and then versus like Alberta and Canada, and how the interaction's been going on. And I'm curious your thoughts, you being in the UK and your interaction there, seeing your country kind of like, if correct me if I'm wrong, kind of like tank a little bit in terms of its policy and its interaction. And a lot of the times, like I'll say what our analogy is here in Alberta, but it might not be the same for you, or it might resonate with you, which is we compare it a lot to Canada and Alberta to almost like an abusive relationship, like an abusive couple. And so how it gets compared.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So I'm wondering, like, based on the, I guess, interactions that we've been talking about of just like how you're interacting with yourself and then how others interact with themselves. And we're seeing that happen on a larger scale, even within our own countries and provinces and such.
Well, it's human beings all the way down. It's human beings being human, engaged in particular discourses. So if I were to become Prime Minister of the UK, well, I'd make it really easy for everybody to home educate. Don't send kids to school, just home educate them. And here's how you do it. Just let them play and play and play, because that's what we did. If that's what you want to do, that conversation that I am. And in my personal life, I've convinced some of my friends and family to home educate. But if I were to be prime minister, provided I wasn't captured or controlled or compromised, that conversation would play out on a much larger scale. So it's all human beings being human, doing what human beings do, and and covering their asses. That's what they're doing. They're covering their asses. And there's something about the importance of integrity. And I don't mean being right, being wrong, or moral. I'm talking about being whole and complete, being solid, being of perfect form, being as it should be. So, for example, the foundation of a house, if the foundation is strong and solid, and then you put the superstructure on it, that will prevail. If the foundation, if it's weak, you use cheap concrete, or you don't, I don't know, prepare the ground properly. You do both. That foundation has no integrity. It's not going to sustain. And then you put the superstructure on top of it, and then along comes a storm and it falls over.
Biblical
And then what
proverbs.
people do is they're dealing with the superstructure, ignoring the underlying out of integrity. So what I think the underlying out of integrity at a societal level is the theft of people's labor, energy, and skills through fractional reserve banking. It's a lie, because what that is, one way of looking at fiat or money, is an energy exchange, an information exchange. And fiat is a fraud because it steals people's labor and energy and skills. And then on top of that gets this superstructure which can't sustain itself because of the fraud at the foundational level of human interaction. What do people do? Well, we got to scramble to so that we prevail because we know this thing's going to collapse. How do we survive? Those at the top: digital IDs, CDCs, We need to censor people from spreading ideas and communicating with each other. We need to get them fighting with each other so they don't fight us. And also, if we reduce the population, then they're easier to control. It's easier to defeat 500 million people than it is to defeat 7 billion people or 8 billion people.
How I'm seeing that is playing with what you were mentioning before, which is like you think that something's wrong with you, and then you pretend that it's not. It's not wrong with you, and then you're pretending that you're pretending. Oh, my name's
Madison.
Macy, by the way.
Sorry,
You're
Macy.
Madison.
I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm Macy.
I apologize.
That's okay.
Mike is the one with the beard. I've worked that one out. Macy. Okay, I'm going to step out a little bit, right? Say what you're saying again, but use the personal pronoun. Just try it.
What do you mean?
I.
I? Well,
Instead of saying you, say I, yeah.
Well, I'm referring to what you said though. As in you gave your analogy. And so I'm like, oh, and playing on what you previously mentioned, it sounds like it's similar to what you're talking about right now.
I gave my analogy. This is what we do as human beings is I pretend and I pretend that I'm not pretending. And then I want to survive.
I see what you're saying, right.
And this
that I pretending, it seems similar then even to the foundation of the fiat that you're talking about, which is that there's something that is wrong, and then all of a sudden it's trying to pretend that something's not wrong, and then it's just pretending that it's pretending that something's not wrong.
The hidden tax, right?
The hidden tax, right? And because like at the surface, I mean, most of the time people can just say that, I guess the road to hell is paved with good intentions and such, right? But at the foundation, as you're talking about, it's like, well, something definitely was wrong because they're just looking a way to create something out of nothing, that transfer of energy, and then you're basically just like sucking like a vampire the actual energy.
The parasite.
Yeah. It's stealing.
When in the lieu of an overall theme, is there anything that you would like to contribute as far as a message to those that are our viewers? We want to encourage them to go to your channel. We're going to post up all of your socials. But is there anything that you feel that didn't get talked about in this introduction to you through this podcast?
Yeah. I'm an idiot. And I'm not invalidating myself here, right? I'm just doing the, whatever I can, however I can, to make whatever difference I can make. And we all have to deal with ourselves. I have to deal with myself. I mean, this is it. He is as good as it gets. This is the best I've got. There is no cavalry. And I think I would say is that from my take on it, this project will fail. They're going to do, I've said this on my channel a few times, they're going to do damage. They're going to do a lot of damage. There's more shit to go through, but this project is going to fail. We are going to move to a greater decentralized world where people have autonomy. And what it takes is for us to speak out, connect with each other. And thank you very much for having me on.
It's our pleasure. It's an honor. We completely concur with the importance of the plebeian message. And we always play with that word because in all actuality, we're just human beings trying to actually navigate some pretty tumultuous waters right now. It's a line from a film where say, like, why have enemies when we can have friends? Because we're already in a system that is giving us our enemies, and we didn't make them. So they're trying to psyop us into this, and we don't want to play their game. We know that there's more friendships to be found. We know that there's more good relationships to be found, but we do agree with you. They're going to cause a whole shitload of damage along the way. So we're very thankful that your voice is out there. This is why we were honored and wanted to have you on our show so that people could, if Sean gets taken out, then we want to be able to pick up the baton. If we get taken out, then we know that we can put people to your show. And many others that have watched our program is that this is an overall intention to start getting the podcasters that are the media now to have each other's backs, to tell each other's stories so that people can find some inspiration in watching regular people think through their scenarios, and they can use their mirror neurons, and inspiration can bring them forward to making that decision of be the change in the world that you would like to see. And I hope that this is the beginning of a few touching bases, because I would like to know some specifics about what's going on in the UK. And we would love to share specifics about what's going on in Alberta.
I'm like, we didn't even get to touch on that yet. So I'm excited. That's always the nice thing, actually, is when you don't touch on the stuff, because you're like, it means there's more to talk about. And I like that. I don't know.
Actually, that's one of the big takeaways from this interview with Crypto, which is an epiphany for me reading The Master and His Emissary, is that, the oligarchs like to tell us and convince us that, like Crypto alluded to, there's something wrong with us. And the oligarchs say, we're a plague. We are talking cows. We are broken. And meanwhile, they just don't include the fact that they're facilitating this brokenness and the bad behavior. But aside from that, Crypto has articulated an idea that McGilchrist talked about in the book. And he said, to get to the generalities, people like Alex Craner, Tom Luongo, it really does increase the male audience, because that really resonates the global talk and the finances. It increases the male interest. But all of the particulars, which is the individual that Crypto has been alluding to and that we go back to, that's the particular to identify the general, which is the global world. But you can identify the global patterns by going through the particular, which is your individual self. And that's where we can also get women, because some women think they're too dumb and I just don't understand politics. I don't understand finances, or that's my husband's realm. Yet they really like self-help, and because they're good with relationships. So even that dynamic, it's like that, those are the things that unite both, is that you go through the particular, the individual, and that can lead you better to, because even God, you can understand God a lot better by understanding the gifts he gave you, which is you. And so that is one big theme that you've reminded me of from the book that really hit home, because even going back to the beginning when you talked about religion, I remember having this existential crisis moment, because I thought, oh gosh, if religion isn't what my mom and dad had, because that was more cult-like and ideal, that was dogma, that wasn't faith. And then reading McGilchrist talk about the brain and the particular of the individual, I'm like, I understand God a lot better now. Thank you. And it brought my faith back, which is funny because people wouldn't think so. They'd think that's arrogant because, oh, you're painting yourself as this godly thing. It's like, well, if I'm made in God's image, there we go. And so I'm just getting closer to what he intended for me, and that's trying to become the better version of myself. So that's an idea that I very much appreciate, and I think is a good takeaway for people to understand. It's a good model. So thank you.
Thank you. And Madison, I say, there's no getting to a better version of yourself, because you already are whole, perfect, and complete.
Why, thank you. Then I won't change from here on in.
Yeah, good luck with that.
No. Your ability to change is the perfect whole part of you.
Yeah, right.
No. Change causes persistence. There's stuff for me. I go through life like there's something wrong with me. That's already always there. Like I breathe oxygen, and then there's things for me to be responsible for that are manifestations of that. But I got to keep bear in mind, there's nothing wrong with me. This is it. This is it.
Well, on the topic of being responsible, you alluded to the no tax for war that that people can do in the UK. And you have many podcasts on this, and I do recommend people go to, so you have a Rumble channel people can find if they prefer Rumble, or your YouTube channel, Rich Does Politics. Both will be in the description. And if you go there, everybody, there's podcasts that he did that teach you more about the no tax for war and the mechanisms that make it actually feasible to withhold your taxes, because people watching this show ought to know where the money goes, the laundering. But Canadians, I believe, when you look at all the mechanisms he paints in the UK, Canada subscribed to all the same measures and can, if you would like to also implement this here in Canada, because it's a Commonwealth country thing. Many of the Commonwealths are subscribed to these same measure so you can replicate it and try and put your taxes towards something else. As we know here in Alberta, we're trying to keep our taxes in our pocket because we know where it's going and we know where it's not going. So, and then finally, CryptoRich is on X. So if everybody wants to check them out while they are doing their daily poop scroll, this is where you can go.
Scrapping with Luongo Craner and the rest of the bunch.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on part 5.
you.
This has been At Home with Holmes.
Bye.
Toodaloo!